Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to... Well, I was going to say welcome back, but this might well be the first episode of the Crosswires podcast. So, welcome to the Crosswires podcast. I'm James, and we're all about taking a look at technology and looking at it in a reflective manner and looking at some really cool things. My guest today is someone who, I have to admit, I've admired for a long time. I have also indirectly caused his death on many occasions back in the early 90s. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stoo Cambridge.
Hello, and I can forgive you for killing me numerous times. I do walk with a bit of a funny walk now because I've got sort of shrapnel in my leg, but I'll forgive you for that one. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, I just wonder how many times that joke gets told.
Every time I speak to somebody, probably. But I often make it myself, so I never learn.
So I guess people are probably wondering at this point how on earth I came to get shrapnel in your leg. Do you want to give us a little bit of introduction to who you are, where maybe that reference comes from? Because not everyone's going to know, unfortunately.
Yeah, all these young whippersnappers who are listening to this have got no idea. I'm probably most known for a game called Cannon Fodder on the Amiga. I used to work for Sensible Software, who developed lots of 8-bit games on the Commodore 64, and then they moved on to 16-bit games on the Amiga. That's probably the one title that I'm really recognised for, which is Cannon Fodder. And
it holds a lot of very, very fond memories for me. It was one of the games that I spent far too much time playing on the Amiga. I'm a sequel, to be fair. Both fantastic games. But you're an artist, Stu, so one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is to talk a little bit about how design and art has changed so much since back in the 80s when you would first been starting out with Sensible software. First of all, I guess my first question is, what tools did you actually have available? I mean, in my mind, I associate Amiga design with Deluxe Paint, but I'm sure there's far more to it than that.
You're spot on. I mean, D-Paint was the go-to sort of application that I think pretty much most Amiga video game artists used. I fell in love with the Amiga the first time I saw it on BBC Micro Live when Fred Harris did a demonstration of it. And I'd seen it in the press, and I knew I'd wanted one. But when I saw it actually running on the TV on this BBC Micro Live, I thought, that machine's like from the future. And it really did feel like it wasn't of its time. It somehow materialised through some kind of time portal and it appeared, in the late 80s. And I knew I wanted one. But a little bit of backstory. I mean, my interest in computers was basically born from when I first got a VIC-20 back in the early 80s. And that's when all the home computers were really starting to kind of emerge in the UK. And I wanted a Commodore 64 really, but my dad had said to me like, if you want one, we'll get you something that's not quite as expensive and see how you get on. Because if it's only like a 5-minute wonder or it's a fad, then we haven't spent loads of money on something. Because the 64 was quite expensive at the time. So I got the VIC-20 and loved it and played lots of games and fell in love with Jeff Minter's games. I mean, they really were my kind of inspiration, and I think the driving force for me to say, like, I want to do that as a living. I want to be a video game developer. And at the time, I was programming as well, so I'd got into programming, and I was doing obviously pixel art in its very limited form on those early machines. And I progressed to the 128 where I kind of got into assembler, and I just progressed all the way through until I got the Amiga. So the Amiga. I mean, the tools back then. I mean, D-Paint really was like the Photoshop of its day, and I mean, even today, I look back and I think seeing that King Tut mask that was on the, in the magazines, thinking surely that's not a real image from that computer, because you look at it and you think that can't really be because I mean, you think at the time we had the Commodore 64 and the Spectrum, and they were good machines for their time. But when you put an Amiga screen next to it, it's like something from another world. So, and that's exactly how I felt when I first used one. I was like, this is so futuristic. This is so incredible. And I don't think I ever looked back.
Fantastic. I mean, my first computer was an Amiga. It was an Amiga 600. The much maligned 600, I think we both have a common... I'd say acquaintance with Neil from RMC.
Yes.
And Neil's Discord is full of very interesting people. And I do remember my absolute disgust when Control-Alt-Reese in a RMC live video nearly put a table saw to an A600.
Oh.
That was just painfully. Yes.
I'll tell you, the thing with the 600, and I know it did get quite a lot of flack, is the problem we found is that they changed the configuration slightly, but because there was no keypad. If you was developing something that needed a keypad, it wouldn't pick it up, obviously, because there wasn't one in existence on that machine. I think there was a few little funny changes that Commodore had made, and I remember from very vaguely there was some things going down with the code where we had to test for things to make sure it would work on a 600, because they did change it slightly. But I think the biggest one was this lack of a keypad, and I think some of the flight simulators probably sort of wouldn't run properly on it because they needed the keypad for certain controls.
I seem to remember Falcon having real problems on the 600. My dad got it and he was like, how on earth do I play this without a numpad?
Yeah.
And I think we'd done something where it said, you can use these alternative controls. But, it was a good machine. And from a hardware point of view, I didn't realise it was more beyond it just being I think a lot of people describe it as an A500 Plus with the ECS chipset.
Yes.
Without the numpad, but there's obviously a bit more to it than that.
Yeah.
It didn't have the sidecar side of things. So it didn't have all the hardware expansion abilities that the 500 series did. And of course, then the 1200 came out with the AGA.
Yeah.
What from if we take Cannon Fodder as an example, because it's became, but I'm most familiar with, and I'm sure the people who recognise your name are most familiar with who are listening. Can you tell us maybe some of the challenges that you guys faced with the graphics for Cannon Fodder, or any little funny stories of how things had to be shoehorned in, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest change that was made fairly early on, for me anyway, was the size of the tile set. I mean, originally, when I first started, and bear in mind, this is my first real kind of like in-house job, and I was so excited to got the job there because I was a big fan of their games beforehand. So I was fans of their 64 games, and I joined just as Megalomania was being finished. So I got to see the final stages of development of Megalomania, so when I started, I thought, I don't know if I'm like, this is imposter syndrome kicking in, yourself, am I good enough? How am I going to do this? Because these guys are like, rock star game developers, and I'm just like, a young boy from, I think I was about 19, 20 when I started, and I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do? So I started doing this tile set, which was a really rubbish graphics, really. I mean, when I look back at that, they were awful. And I did this kind of like moorlands, kind of like grassy tiles, but they were 32 by 32 pixels. And I don't know if we got them in, but then we made a decision. I think Jules had started putting them in, and I think we made the decision that it's probably better to get 16 by 16 tiles in. So that was the real start of the actual look that we see today in the game that came out, where I then, okay, let's go back, start it again. Because we worked out we'd get more variations in the backgrounds if we had 16 by 16 tiles, even though I think it was quicker for the machine to use 32s, I think, something like that. So we got all that in, but one of the challenges which I faced was, how do you animate characters so small? And I'd done a game before I worked at Sensible called The Executioner, which had like some really tiny little men jumping up and down. And The Executioner, for anyone who might be interested, is like a thrust style game on the Amiga. And the idea was that you'd go around on different planets and you could pick up things, and you'd pick up these prisoners, and I think you torture them, but you wouldn't see anything. It was more like hit a button, what you're going to do to electrocute them, and it was like that. But in all honesty, that was such a naff part of the game. It would have been better if we'd have developed it just as a thrust game. But in that game, I'd done these tiny little characters, which are like about 6 pixels high, and they would literally just jump up and down to say, like, rescue me, rescue me. So I'd kind of got an idea of how to animate characters at that sort of size, which I think probably came in handy when I was started Cannon Fodder. Although at the time I didn't even think like that. You just did it. But the biggest challenge initially was getting these characters to move, because you've got something that's just like 12 pixels high. And I think their arms were only like 2 pixels high anyway, 2 pixels long, or so you think, well, how do you do that? And I came up with this idea of using the color palette. So if a soldier's walking forward, like so he's facing the screen, and he's walking down the screen, I would use the color to give the impression that the arm is moving forward by making the pixel lighter, and then when it goes back, darken the pixel down, and then move it back up 1 pixel. So you get this kind of it's a bit of a cheat really, but the eye is fooled into seeing this movement going forward and backward, where really the pixel's not moving at all. And I did that for the legs, and I did that for the arms, and it really worked. So I used that effect on a lot of other sprites, and but the best thing was when we saw those in the game, because you're animating stuff in D-Paint, and you get them moving around the screen in D-Paint, and it all looks good. But once they go in the game, they're actually moving around on their own, almost on their own free will. And that was just a magical moment, because when Jules got it linked to the mouse, and you could click and you could tell them where to go, it's like, wow, these little soldiers are now alive in the game, and they follow where you tell them to go, and it's just brilliant. It was really, really good.
I often look at games like Command and Conquer and always have a little bit of, is there some inspiration from Cannon Fodder? Of course, but lineage of that game is, if I remember correctly, is Dune 2 from the Amiga, because that was a Westwood Studios game. But again, the scale of these things, and I remember the not to get too graphic, but you really did feel that when you shot someone, or when one of your characters got shot, typically you, they actually died, but the gore was believable enough at such a small scale. I mean, all the other little elements, like the leveling up of the ranks and just the whole graphical style of that game, was unlike anything I'd seen before. Now, as I said, the Amiga was my first machine, but I'd seen other machines, and it was just enticing. And let's not forget the music as well, because that was just perfect for that game.
Yeah, I mean the graphics. I mean, I'm a big fan of arcade games, and I mean growing up in the 80s. I grew up in the 70s, and then when I hit my sort of teenage years in the 80s, and the arcades were where all the latest stuff came out. All the technology. And I think today it's kind of flipped around, where all the latest technology tends to appear in the home now rather than out in arcades. The arcades are pretty much almost like a nostalgia trip now in some places. So I would be down Southend, which is where we used to go. Being an Essex boy, Southend was the destination to go to see all the latest arcade games. And I would be so heavily influenced by that style of graphics, like some of the Capcom stuff, the Konami stuff, SNK, all those games which were coming out from Japan. I was like in awe of the graphics. And bear in mind, we're going back at the time. I mean, the graphics weren't that great when you look at them now.
No.
But back then, Space Invaders came out, and then they brought out, and then Galaxians appeared, and that had more colours per sprite. And all of a sudden, you had games like Ghosts and Goblins, which had multicoloured graphics, which were really multicolour. And then games like Sidearms and Nemesis and all these sort of games come out. So I would visit the arcades, and I would actually have my face up against the screen looking at the pixels to see how many. Which is really difficult on a CRT, because they blur everything, don't they? So
of course, yes.
So yeah, that's right. So I was looking at these screens. I'm like, how do they do? How many colours has that got? And how many shades of brown is on that on that dirt, or how many shades of green on those trees? But it obviously stuck in my head. So when I did start at Sensible, or even before Sensible, when I started out on the Amiga, the first thing I wanted to do was create arcade-style graphics, and I just practiced and brought a portfolio up together, and just kind of honed those skills in creating those graphics I wanted to see. And I think that's what was the foundation for what Cannon Fodder ended up looking like, was trying to create something that was arcadey, but was still kind of like a strategically sort of placed game, rather than being a full strategy game. It was more of an arcadey strategy game, and that's very much representative in the graphics.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on to sort of moving into now where we are with design, there's one thing probably should. I don't know if we should mention this. On the CD32 version of the game, there is a wonderful video intro.
Oh, yes. Yes. That was fun to do.
It looked a lot of fun. It looked incredible. And of course, now I don't want to dig too much into this, but wasn't there a huge controversy with the game and the British Legion?
Yes, there was. I mean, John is far more qualified to talk about that than me, because I never really got involved in all the Poppy stuff. Although I have to say I probably am to blame.
Oh, now it comes out.
Because when we was doing the game, and I can't remember how the Poppy came about. Whether it was like, I don't know if John or Chris suggested it. I honestly don't know. But we had the idea of having a Poppy in the game, for the title screen, and a representative for those who'd fallen in battle, and on the medal screen. And because it was at the same time as we was near Remembrance Day, Remembrance Sunday, obviously all the Poppy sellers are out, all the veterans are out selling Poppy. So I just used a Poppy from that and taped it to my monitor, drew the title screen one, drew two more for the medal screen, and that was it. And that was the end of it. Then, of course, it somehow got out that, I don't know what happened, but it got out that the British Legion had seen it or had heard about it and thought we was like, we was
taking
being quite, we weren't really being very serious about, people who died, blah, 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 blah. And I think for legal reasons, they said you're using our Poppy and you can't use it, and can you change it? And I mean, I might be mistaken because I never got involved in any of that sort of stuff. John did. But anyway, it turns out that we ended up changing the Poppy. Yeah. And so I sort of run out the studio very slowly. And near our offices in Saffron Walden, there was quite a few poppies growing out of bottom walls and fields and stuff. So I found a couple, and I went. I think there wasn't that far to walk, actually. I think I turned around the corner and there was a few there, and I picked a couple of them off and got back to the office, stuck them to my monitor, and then drew the replacement ones, which were totally different. But at the time, I wasn't very happy about doing it because we was really close to finishing the game. We'd been working quite long hours. We're doing, putting some all-nighters quite frequently.
Oh, yeah.
And the very thought of having to draw another title screen and two more smaller ones at 0 hour was like, no, you've got to be kidding me, So reluctantly, I drew. But the consummate professional that I am, I obviously made them look as good as I could, as I always do. But underneath those nice graphics is like, a lot of moaning and groaning, going, no, don't want to do it again. But
I think anyone who's ever done design for a client, I mean, I won't name names, but I've had a recent experience of this where I've done this to brief, because it always happens. You get a brief from the client, you design the work to a brief, and then somebody else at the client says, oh, no, you need to throw all of that away and start over. So I absolutely can relate to that. Yeah. But, I mean, just from my perspective, playing it, I never for 1 second thought that anybody at Sensible Software was taking any sort of mickey out of those who died. I actually thought it was a wonderful tribute, and the way it was handled, the whole game. And, I always compare it to Blackadder. People don't get too offended at Blackadder. Well, not anymore. There was a lot of controversy about Blackadder Goes Forth. But when you look at it now, it's a wonderful show. And Cannon Fodder is a great game.
It is indeed. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, because there's a great moment in the development of Cannon Fodder where we had the soldiers in, and originally we was going to have a first name and a second name, like a forename and a surname in for the characters, but there just wasn't enough memory to have two names, and I think the amount of memory needed would have been ridiculous. So we went for first names. So when they went in, it was really weird because the dynamic of the game changed literally that moment, because all of a sudden you had these names associated with these sprites, and you you didn't feel it initially, but when you had somebody who'd been in the game and he was like, he survived a couple of missions
Yeah.
and he'd been ranked up a couple of levels and he was like, a captain or whatever, and he died, he got like a grenade or whatever, he got shot. You think, oh no, you really did feel like you'd lost that character,
Yeah.
and it was really weird because I mean, you got these tiny little sprites which really have got no real character. They're just pixels. They're very small pixels, and there's nothing really there to identify them. But by pairing them with a name, you kind of fill in the gaps, and before you know it, you've got these little characters which have got little identities in your head, and so when they're no longer there, and they also you see their memorial on the hill screen, you think, wow, and it kind of brought that home. So at the time, when obviously we was getting all this bad press, it's like the people writing this bad press just was showing their levels of ignorance because they'd never even played the game. And I think if a lot of these people at the time in the press had actually sat down and played it, they'd have realised that, hold on a minute, that's not the message that these guys are giving out. It's actually, quite a sympathetic tone towards war. It is bad, it is horrible, and people do die. But having said that, I mean, the press we got, it didn't damage us. I mean, I think it probably helped us in a lot of ways because it brought the attention of the game to many people who may otherwise not have heard of it.
I seem to remember some of the great articles. I mean, I was, until it folded, I was a huge fan of the one Amiga. It was always at my newsagents. I never had to ask for the cover disc, though. It was always there, thankfully.
Yeah, that's good.
I love that line. So, moving swiftly into the future, taking our time machine forward, you're still very much doing art, and I think probably it's fair to say one of the things that I know you for now is the retro... Now, I'm going to get this right. Hang on.
It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
It is a bit, so let's make sure we get this right. The Colouring Book of Retro Computers,
Yes.
Volume 1.
I know. It's cool, isn't it?
Over 30 pages of
Yes.
tech nostalgia.
Yes,
I mean, it is
I've got one
fantastic.
in as
So,
well.
oh yeah, look, yeah, we both got ours.
I
And
came prepared.
I've got my my signed by yourself. I think your signature is a lot nicer than Neil's, to be fair.
The check's in the post, all right? The check's in the post.
Cheers, mate. Cheers. So I guess we should probably. I mean, how did that even come about?
Oh, it was one of those things where, I mean, I'd watched Neil's channel for, I can't remember how long it was. I was on and off. I'd watched it for pretty much since he'd started. I mean, I discovered his channel probably a bit later than a lot of people, but I caught up. I used to have his videos on, and I thought, and one day he messaged me to say, would you be interested in being on like an interview and all that? I said, yeah. And I remember running in to my wife and saying, I never guess what. And she had no idea what I was talking about. So it's like, so anyway, so I got on to talking to Neil on his retro tea breaks, and I think we did a retro discs, Island diskettes as well with
Yes, yeah,
Dr. A, with which is good. He's that was great. It's fun as well, and I think I showed my Sega bias with the music tracks I'd chosen, which was not intentional, but it just kind of turned out that way. Anyway, so we did that, and I did, and then a little bit later, Neil did his the book for retro tea breaks, and
of course, yes.
asked me if I'd be, and I was in it. I was I was honoured to be in the book, and he asked me if I'd be interested in doing like the profile pictures for like all the people in the book. So I said, yeah, that'd be cool. So I did the pixel portraits for those. And that went really, really well. And we had a few backers pictures. We did some of those, and great. And then a little bit later, Neil just said to me about, we've got this idea. I want to talk to you about a project. It's all right. He said, well, think about doing a colouring book. And I was like, you what? Colouring book? Yeah, retro computing colouring book. And I'm thinking, right, okay.
I mean, it doesn't exactly... It's not the sort of image I put with a bunch of retro... How to put this... older retro computer fans.
Yes, I know. It's bonkers, but I loved it. I love the idea because it is bonkers.
Yeah.
And so we got talking and we worked out, a few things. It was okay. Let's look at this, and we got like a few lists made of what machines we could put in it. And then Mark, who a lot of people might probably know Mark. They might see him on some of the videos from Retro Group. Uh, he I was talking to him, and he said, "Well, I've took some photos of my pet, my Commodore pet." He said, "I've got a really good idea." He said, "We'll take it with the lid open,
Oh
and then we can
yes.
show the insides of the machines and the case." And from that moment, it all clicked. It was like, "That's it. That's genius idea. What a brilliant idea." So, thanks to Mark, we've now got this foundation of what the book would look like, and all I had to do is draw it. so, so we went through, and I went over to the cave, took loads. I mean, it was quite funny because we got all these machines, and Neil had his screwdriver, and he's undoing all the machines, and we were trying not to lose. And he did nearly lose the screw to, I think it was the what did he have? It was a Spectrum or the Atari. No, it was the Atari VCS, and he lost the screw to the Atari VCS, and he's and we're looking at what these insides of these machines are like. Got loads and loads and loads of reference photos, and that was it really. And that was last year I started the project, and it was just a fantastic project to work on. And for me, on a personal level, it was almost like saying, look, all these people who just pigeonhole you as like a pixel artist, it's like, see, I told you.
I can do real art too,
Yeah,
mate.
I,
Yeah.
I sound like I've got this real chip on my shoulder now, don't I? Well, I haven't. I really haven't. But it's
I mean,
just
it is the first thing. It is the first thing that Stu said to me in pre-show. Like, I'm more than just a pixel artist, you know.
But the thing is, it was great because it was something that wasn't the norm for me. I mean, I do illustration work and I do sort of other stuff, but this was much more personal because I love the stuff that's in it. I've got a real interest in all this retro gear and all the tech, so I love it. And then it just progressed onto the sort of style. When I first did the first illustration, the Commodore PET, it was literally right. What sort of look do I want to go for? Because I know it's going to be line art because it's going to be a colouring book.
Yeah.
And I used a piece of software called Critter, or Krita, I don't know how you pronounce it, it's Krita or Critter, which is open source. That I've been using that for probably about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, on and off. But it's got a fantastic brush engine. And what I did is I wanted to create a look that was almost like a photocopied, but like old kind of like manual look with the line art.
Oh, yes, like the Haynes manual styles.
Yeah, but not quite as rugged. You know when you photocopy something too many times, you lose the detail,
Mm.
and the line edges get a little bit sort of blurry, or they get a little bit sort of rough. I wanted to create that kind of look with the lines, but it was subtle, so it wasn't immediate. So when you look really close, you might see it. So I took one of the existing brushes and I just manipulated a bit to give it a bit of a roughness and that. And I used that pretty much for most of the line art in the book. And when I sent the first file over, I was thinking, oh, I hope they like it. I hope they like it. Or, I hope this is the sort of thing that everyone had in their heads and what they thought it would look like. And thankfully, everyone said, yeah, this is great. So I did a colour version of the pet as well, because we had to get the Kickstarter out. So and we thought, right, okay, we'll get a coloured version out. So I coloured up the pet, and it hit the Kickstarter, and thankfully everyone seemed to want it because it did really, really well. And the most important thing is it raised enough money for the cave to be finished, and turn it into a proper exhibition space. And that was the main driver for the book, was to raise funds for that. And to be honest, I mean, having been to the cave, I think about 4 times now, I'm in awe every time I walk through the door. I mean, it's such an amazing place. It really is.
Because you were there on Sunday doing so for patrons who backed not patrons, sorry, pledges who'd backed the higher, one of the higher levels. Now I don't mind telling people what I did. I did the book, the digital version, and the postcodes and the signed version.
Yes.
But the postcodes, by the way, for anyone who watches the YouTube videos, once I get a little bit more of a studio sort of up and running here, they will be in the background, so do watch out for them. But people could back a colouring in the cave day and turn up and in theory, colour in the cave. But that didn't really happen, did it, Stu?
No. I mean, I did have some colouring pencils on my desk. But see, the funny thing is that it's like I mean, I was saying this on Sunday. I said it's like walking into Neil's secret man cave. That he doesn't know anyone's there, but you're all running riot because you want to have a go at everything. But you want to have a go before Neil comes back. It's that kind of. And obviously, that's just utter nonsense. But that's in my brain. That's how I see it. It's like, oh, look, all this cool stuff. It's like a kid in a candy shop. You're like, oh, this is amazing, you know. And all the machines are working. So pretty much what happened was it was a fantastic day. It really, really was a great day. And everyone just was playing on all the machines, and lots of people were talking. I'm sure a lot of people knew each other already from like Discord and just conversing on the internet. People were talking to me, they were talking to Mark, talking to everybody, Neil. Everybody was having a good old chinwag. But the thing is, the colouring, the colouring part of it was like, no, we'll leave that. We'll just go on with talking and you know, about all the techie stuff that's there and just everything really. It was really, really good day. So I think as a title, Colouring the Cave really, really works. But practically, I think it probably would have been a bit boring if everyone was sitting down there with their colouring pencils just quietly colouring around. It's like,
Like Neil going around like a primary school teacher.
yeah,
Doing your homework,
exactly.
yeah, colouring
You've gone out the lines. You've gone out the lines. Keep it in the lines, lads. Keep it in the lines. No, not you over there.
No, the Amiga what's in my book? Is it a 1200 in my book?
No, we've got a 500. We've got 500 in there, I think. Yeah, we've got 500 in there.
500 in there. That's right.
Yeah, we've got five. We've got an A1000 as well. And
yes, I was going to say, but no, the A 500 was never orange. I mean, and again, Neil's got a green one.
Well, see, this is the thing because when we was looking at this, doing it, we did joke about the fact that there's a lot of beige. And I've joked about it since that there is a lot of beige in retro computers, and it was only really until later that like Apple brought out their color range, and I think with the necks they were black, weren't they? The necks was black, and I think there was a couple of the IBM PC clones were grey, and I think there was a few different variants, but most of the machines were like sort of grades of beige, really, weren't they?
Well, that was a big joke with the G3 iMac with all the colours, and Apple making a big deal of this is not your average computer.
And they still look brilliant today. I mean, they look amazing. In fact, I think I would have one in here if I could fit one in. I would. I'd love one just to use as a monitor. I mean, I'm sure you can wire them up to all sorts of things.
Well, people have taken, not necessarily the G3s, but I have seen people take the G4, the lamp stand.
Yeah.
They've taken that, gutted all the old PowerPC guts out of it, sacrificed an M1 based Mac Mini, and turned the old lamp stand into an M1 powered iMac. Okay. It looks incredible.
Oh, that's cool. That's a great idea.
I love it.
That's a great idea. But I think they were genius. They were genius when they brought them out with the colours, because it just totally, showed IBM PC and the clones as like these boring old boxes that nobody really wants to use, because these new Apple ones are amazing.
And of course now every gaming PC on the planet has got more RGB than a Philips Hue showroom. So obviously you mentioned Critter. But I also noticed, sort of in the description of the book as well, I believe you've used a few other products. One of them being a bit of a favourite of mine, more so for the company. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you used Affinity Publisher, I'm guessing, to do the actual page layout.
Yes, I'm a recent user of Convert to Affinity. I mean, I've not used Photoshop for quite a few years now. And the reason being is I'm not against anyone using Photoshop because it's fine, but I found that I used it probably quite a bit about 15 years ago, and then when they started going to this subscription model, I thought, well, I don't really use it enough to warrant forking out money every month, or if you pay, I just can't see the value in that for me personally. No. So I even looked at sort of see if I can buy like just buy a copy off of Adobe that I could then use as a legitimate user afterwards. Couldn't get hold of one. They wouldn't. It was like, no, we're subscription only. You can't. We with this is old software now. We can't sell it. It's like, well, hang on a minute. That's rubbish. So through that time, and I'd spent about 7 years using Linux as a machine. My main machine was Linux for about 7 years. And I think about 5, 6 years ago, I went back to using Windows. And during that time, I'd used a lot of open source software on Linux,
Of course.
and I used Critter, I used GIMP, MyPaint,
Inkscape.
yeah, Inkscape. Inkscape was great. I loved Inkscape. I still use it now, on and off. And I just found that a lot of this stuff is out there, but people don't tend to give it the time of day because they think, well, it's open source and it's free, so it can't be any good. Which, for some software, it probably is. But for a lot of it, they're updated all the time, you
Yeah.
know. And the feedback you get from users is that, well, this is better than some of the commercial stuff because it's if something's broken, you just put it in and somebody will fix it, you know. And I'm not saying it's the be all and end all for everything, but for me it worked, you know. And I went to, you know, I went to Critter, and then I saw Affinity had a sale on, and I bought Affinity Designer
Yeah.
when they had it on 50% off. And the reason I bought it is because obviously it's a vector graphics software and it does bitmaps as well. I'd been using Inkscape for some illustration work, and I just got frustrated on how slow it would become. And I know that it's on their roadmap to fix. They're going to put new rendering stuff in it and that. But I thought, well, I can't wait, you know. And this came out, and I tried it, and I think they did like a 60-day trial, which is amazing.
They were
you know.
really generous with their
And
trials.
they've been really generous with their trials. And I tried it for 60 days and found that I really, really, really liked it. And it was quick. It was really quick. So I thought, right, okay. And when they did this 50% off, I thought, it's just crazy not to buy it. I think it was like 25 quid or
Oh, it's
something.
ridiculously cheap, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, well, that's a no-brainer, really. So I bought it and I started using it. So when we was thinking about doing this book, or it was before I started doing the book, they did another sale, and I thought, well, I'm going to buy the other two pieces of software. I probably won't use the photo one much because I don't really tend to use, but I know the publishing one I would probably use. And I'd looked into it a little bit because I'd seen like videos on YouTube of people using it. I thought that looks pretty cool, and I could see myself using that. And the thing that got me was it does linked image files. So for me as an artist, I can create an image, export it, link it into say like a Affinity like publisher file, and then when I update it again later, it just updates automatically, which for me is just brilliant because I haven't got to mess around importing it in again or resizing it or applying layer styles to it or anything like that. It just does it. So I bought it, and it just worked a treat for this book because for that very reason. And I mean, for instance, in the book, you've got like the backgrounds, which is lots of little sort of discs or, you know, retro bits and pieces. And I drew probably about 5 or 6 variants of like a floppy disk or cassettes or whatever at different angles. But Affinity was brilliant because I could bring it in, I could link the object in, clone it, and move it all about, and then I think actually that label don't look right, or maybe I want to put something on the label, and then they all change instantly, and I wouldn't have to muck around editing that file again.
The symbols functionality is so powerful.
Exactly, yeah, it's brilliant. I'm actually using it at the moment. I'm on a job at the moment. I'm doing a client job at the moment, and I'm using the symbols for everything at the moment because it's just making my life a lot easier, and it just worked. But the other thing is because it's designed for print, I could crank the DPI right up, knowing that it's never going to be that high when it gets exported. But if we ever want to do a poster or they want to do like, you know, something else later, I know that the images files all in there at that high resolution, and the machine can handle it, the software can handle it. But I just found it's a really, really good bit of software, and the updates are fairly frequent as well, which I like.
They are.
You know,
And I've had Designer now, I think, since I'm going to say 2016, maybe a bit earlier.
Oh, right, okay.
I've never had to pay for an update.
Yeah. See,
That's
that appeals
incredible.
to me. Yeah, it is incredible. It really is. And I think more software companies need to do that. They need to be more like that. I think they need to be more to take care of their customers. Now, if they release an update in like, you know, a year's time and say, look, we're going to be doing a major update here. If you're an existing, we can do you an upgrade for like, you know, whatever, and it's reasonable, then I would quite happy pay if it's something that's worthwhile. But I just find it really frustrating when you get companies just milk their user base all the time, and they're not really offering anything extra for that money. And it's like, well, you know, it's not really on, is it?
I think, I mean, look, you know, Rogue Amoeba, who many people will know as the makers of Audio Hijack, which is doing a backup recording for this episode. They're just about to announce Audio Hijack 4. They've already said there will be upgrade pricing. But again, Audio Hijack the current version, I've had since, I'm trying to think when I started the last podcast, say 2018, and again, I've never paid for an upgrade. These are dead, there are some great software houses out there. Now, before we sort of wrap up and make sure you get plenty of opportunity to plug things on your store and anything that you want to, I did have a sort of closing thought to ask you, and that is, obviously, when we look at what the tools we've got now and the styles of art we've got now, and the, particularly maybe modern video games. I mean, look, I'm not a huge gamer, but I do appreciate the hard work that seems to go into most modern games. I say seems to because some just feel sloppy. But do you think we've lost anything because we've got better tools?
I think, see, it's quite interesting because when you look back at, say, I don't know, the 8-bit days where it was all new and fresh, and bearing in mind, I mean, when I was at school, I was fortunate enough to be around when computers were something that no one really knew what they were for. It's like, oh, there's this machine. What do you use it for? Don't know. It's like, homework. Yeah, that's a good thing, homework. But it plays games. It plays games, does it? Oh, okay, right. And then you'd end up seeing it playing games, and then kids would get them in their bedrooms and for Christmas or birthdays, and they'd think, right, I'll code some games on this, and don't worry about the homework. I'll do that later. But it was this sense of wonder, this sense of like, what is this strange machine with a keyboard? What's inside these chips inside? What is this to do? How does it work? And it was this intrigue that I certainly had, and I know many others had of that generation. And I think that did carry on all the way through to the Amiga days. And then all of a sudden something happened. We got to the point where PCs were the main sort of machine that you'd use for gaming on computers. And then you'd have engines appear, and then you'd have all these other things appear, and then it kind of became not so much of an interest; it was more like of a job. And I'm not saying that there are plenty of people writing games because they want to write games, but I think the generations that grew up, writing games from an early age, that demographic from that age group is kind of like is not so much there anymore. Obviously there are going to be kids who go to school and they want to write games for a living. There'll always be kids who want to write games for a living, but the number of them, I think, is not the same as it was comparatively to now. And I think the fact that you can, I don't know, download a game sort of programming system, and you can have all these templates already there for you, kind of takes away a lot of the fun. But I think the amount of information available today is phenomenal. You can type anything into a search engine and you get the answers that you want most of the time, whether it's a bit of code, how to use a piece of software, learn a language, whatever you want to do, fix your car, wallpaper or something, or build a wall, anything you want to do, it's there. Back then, you had to really hunt and track down that information. And when you got that information, you made sure you used it. When I started programming, there was no books. There was the odd book you'd get from the library, which was usually about 6 months out of date or a year out of date. And it was literally like, well, I'll just trial and error and see how this works. So I think with software, in some respects, the software is an awful lot better now, because the system's a lot better. One good example, when I was at the Cave on Sunday, Mark had put on, he'd spent a lot of time setting up their multi-system, their FPGA multi-system, which is a fantastic device, I have to say. Oh, God, it is awesome. It is a really, really good bit of kit. And he put the Amiga core on it. And we had D-Paint running, and I'd given him some of my old work files, and he put them on there. And I'd forgotten how to use D-Paint, right? And I think, how do I remap the colours? How do I do this? But then I realised that it had hardly any functions. It was so stripped down from what I remember. But my perception was that this was an all singing, all dancing application. But looking at it from 2022 back to the 90s, I realised actually it wasn't. It really wasn't as feature rich as I thought. No. But because we didn't know any different back then, it was new. I can remember it from the impact it had on me because I'd never seen anything like it before. Today I use a software called ProMotion by Cosmigo, and that is like the modern day version of D-Paint, but it's like streets ahead of what D-Paint could do, and I use it all the time. It's brilliant. But you look at the functions that software's got compared to, say, D-Paint, and there is just no comparison. It does so much more. So in many ways, the tools that we have today are far more advanced than what we had back then. But then the it's hard to explain. I think the source of inspiration or the drive to be different has gone for a lot of people, I think, or for a lot of, or if it is there, it isn't evident in the things that we're seeing, you know.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because sort of linking back to Cannon Fodder. Just out of interest, by the way, obviously you mentioned earlier the was it Micro Live?
Micro Live, yeah, BBC Micro Live, yes.
So you would it be fair to say you would have been around for the whole computers in education program, but really kicked off in the 80s?
Yeah.
There's a wonderful book, and there's an audio book called I think it's called Electronic Dreams. It's the story of those early days. It's
okay.
a wonderful. Now, somebody put the computer program. I'll find a link and I'll put it in to the show notes. But somebody put all the episodes of the computer program up on one of the archive sites. And just watching that back is incredible. Mostly because my primary school, I'm showing my age a little bit here, but my primary school, we had BBC Masters. My high school, we had Acorn Archimedes. And just for those youngsters amongst you, the Acorn Archimedes, you owe your iPhone and your Android and pretty much every other bit of tech out there, you owe their existence to those machines, because
totally.
ARM stood for Acorn RISC Machine.
Yeah.
But going back to sort of the Cannon Fodder link, I just think of the copy-paste Call of Duty games these days. Look, if you're a Call of Duty fan, I'm not saying, anyone listening, I'm not saying that you're wrong for being so, but I just don't see the inspiration in those games. Oh, let's add this new gun that's got 25,000 more stopping power. I don't pretend to understand guns, so that's... And I don't play Call of Duty games. I mean, I'm playing a game at the moment that I got with a bundle that was designed to support the people of Ukraine. It's called Skyrock.
That's that huge bundle, wasn't it? That was massive.
What was that, like $10?
I know, it's crazy.
It's crazy. Well, there's a game in there called Skyrock, and it's a wonderful sort of fighter jet game. But the graphics are all pixel shaded, and that is an example of genuine creativity. It doesn't have to be RTX on. It's so good.
I think the other thing which is I just thought of is that when you think like back to sort of the earlier days, pixel art was all it was, and it wasn't even known as pixel art. I mean, pixel art is a relatively new term, really, for it. I mean, I would never have said pixel art back then, because it was just graphics. It was just just graphics. That's what I knew it as, or computer graphics. And I think now pixel art's become its own art form. It's taken on its own kind of like genre of art, which people do. But see, I get a bit. I used to get really precious back in the day, because I always anti-alias all my pixels, and I always make things look really smooth, because that goes back to my influences from the arcade, where I'd be looking at CRTs where it anti-aliased it for you. But I would look at all the palette. Well, having said that, I mean, the machines back then had more palettes than what the home computers had. You had more colours. But I'd often, that was my inspiration. So whenever I did anything on the Amiga, I would always make sure the pixels were aliased, it was all smooth, and I could make it as good as I could. And I used to get frustrated when I'd see pixel games, and I think they'd like Amiga games, and they didn't bother to anti-alias anything, and all the edges were all jagged. I think that's rubbish, which is wrong of me now, because it's now an art style, and I but back then I was like, no, that can't. How can they say that's finished? It don't look finished. But when you look at the games today, there are so many titles coming out where it is like just very, very simple pixel art.
I think and there is Celeste is a good example.
Yeah, I mean, there's and it's the thing. I mean, but having said that, there is also some very, very, very good pixel artists out there. I mean, I've seen quite a few. Like when I look at my social media feed, and sometimes you get somebody repost something or retweet something, and you think, wow, that's amazing. These people, some of these skills that some of these artists have got with the pixels. And it's nice to see the art form hasn't kind of died. It's still very, very strong and alive. Despite all this, mega technology we've got now with 3D rendering and the full illustration software that we've got at disposal, there are still people quite happy to put in the hours and spend the time creating pixel art of a high quality, and I think that's great. It's great to see.
Can we say one? Can we just say one thing though? Taking a photograph and running a pixelate filter in Photoshop is not pixel art.
That's so true. Actually, there's a thing about Photoshop because I cannot get my head around anybody using Photoshop to do pixel art.
No.
And I've seen people do it. I've seen videos of people drawing pixel art, and I'm thinking, that's just crazy. How can you sit there and draw pixel art with Photoshop? To the level that I would expect to be good quality pixel art, but I might be wrong.
No, I agree with you, and I mean, just sort of my final thought is I also don't understand anyone using Photoshop for proper vector work because that's what Illustrator's for.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's not go down that. We'll be here for hours.
That's another episode, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's another episode.
So, Stu, thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to come and join me. Let's do the obligatory plugs because there's a lot for you to promote at the moment. Some of it your own stuff, some of it we need. I think Neil would kill me if I didn't at least tell people or get you to tell people where they can go and get the book.
Well, the book is available at rmc.store. If you want to go and get that, or you can go to Neil's channel, Retro Man. No, it's not Retro Man. It's RMC on YouTube. RMC The Cave. It's available there. I think you can get it in both versions. I think you can get the PDF and the full shebang with the printed version, which is. I mean, I think if you can get both, it's great because then you can get the printed version and keep that nice and look through the pages. It's really nice, and then you can print out as many pages as you like and colour to your heart's content with the PDF version, which I think is probably the best idea they had when I was doing it. I wasn't too sure at first. I thought, but I thought, no, that's a good idea because it means that you can preserve the printed one, and then you can just print, and colour, and just keep going.
Absolutely, because I'm using Procreate to colour mine in, and it's taught me a lot about Procreate, if nothing else.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I've used that, and I think it's an amazing bit of kit. That is what they've put on the iPad. It's a brilliant bit of software. Other things I'm doing, I have been really, really busy of late, and I don't understand because I was trying to take it a bit easier, but it hasn't really happened. I set up in 2020. Because of all the things that were going on in the world, a few of the jobs I had lined up were cancelled. And I've always wanted to set up a little shop for me to sell art, not to sort of take over the world or anything like that, but just to have an outlet for art that I produce independently of any projects I'm on. And I thought, well, I'm going to set up a shop, which was a bit of a stupid thing to say when you've never set up a shop before. So I taught myself all about e-commerce shops, and I had a WordPress blog which was stoocambridge.com, which I'd kind of fudged together, and even that was a bit of a bodge because it was a WordPress, and I didn't realise when you do WordPress you're supposed to do a child theme. So I hacked all the CSS in this theme that I'd bought and totally bodged it. And now, when I come back to use it, I'm thinking, actually, I can't update that bit because it's been bodged too much. So I'm in the process of redeveloping my Stoo Cambridge. Anyway, I digress. I go off at a tangent there. So anyway, I set up this shop called thedesigndroid.co.uk. And primarily, it was just so I could sell a few canvas prints of my work. And with a view to having posters and perhaps the odd mouse mat and maybe the odd mug later on. But it's just been a brilliant thing to do. I mean, I've had so much fun doing it, but the best thing is when people have bought something and then they post pictures or they give me feedback, and I just think it's amazing that people are, they take the time to, when they order it, they think the art's good enough and they like what I'm selling. But when they put the stuff up there and you think, that's brilliant. I love it. I love seeing people, when they put the pictures up in their offices or their gaming rooms, and knowing that they've chosen my art rather than somebody else's. It's just a real buzz, and I love it. But I'm hoping to put some more products up there soon. But doing that, and what else have I been doing? I've also been writing for Amiga Addict as well, which I'm in there, which is a great publication.
They've just hit the news agents, haven't they, I believe?
They have, yes, they have, which is brilliant.
So surreal to have an Amiga magazine back in the news agents.
I know. And I was seeing my mate Chris Wilkins, who does the Retro Fusion, all the retro like Zap and Crash, and they've got them in the news agents as well, which is brilliant. So I'm going to be writing for Zap Amiga as well soon. writing an article for them every sort of hopefully every issue if I can get the time. So I've been really busy with that, and yeah, it's really good. And I've also been writing a biography on and off for the last 4 years or so. So I'm trying to do something a little bit different, where I kind of do a proper biography, but also put in lots of like pictures and stuff of interest, you know. So I'm hoping to get that finished when it's finished. So, but it's proved difficult at the moment because I've been so busy, you know. I've been so busy, and of course all the stuff with around the RMC stuff with Neil. I mean, that's you know, that's been a lot of fun, and they're a really good bunch of guys at RMC. They really are. They really are great guys. And but I need to draw some more work for the shop, because I've had the same products on there for the last 12 months or so, and I think people are going, "You ain't got much on there." It's the same old things on there. He hasn't put anything else up there yet.
Well, I have to say, as I was saying to you in pre-show, the A500 with the disc and the Cannon Fodder background, that is, if anyone who is, you know, potentially wanting to buy me a birthday present later this year is listening, you know where to go and buy that.
Also, the other thing is I do is a pixel portraits as well, which is another thing which I've sold quite a few of those, which people are quite good. They like enjoy those. They're quite nice.
Can people sort of get in touch to get?
Yeah, they're on the website. If you go to the designdrive.co.uk, I've got a pixel portrait section, and you can order one through the website. And at the moment, I'm offering them in canvas sizes as well. If you want a canvas print of your portrait once it's finished, and that's up to 12 inch by 12 inch or 10 or 8 inch. And various backgrounds from Amiga 64 or just plain. I do intend to introduce other machines in the backgrounds as well. But if you order one from there, all you need to do is upload your photos once you've ordered, or just drop me an email if you're not sure, and I'll be in touch, and we'll arrange a time for me to do it. But I've done quite a few of those, and again, they're another thing which I really, really enjoy doing, because people it's just those things where you're drawing somebody, and you're trying to get them in this really low resolution, and then somehow I manage to do it, and I don't understand how it works, but I kind of just have the photo next to me, and I just draw the pixels looking at the photo, and also something clicks, and it's like, that's the person, you know, and it just appears, and then I refine it, and then next thing you know, it's finished, and people seem to like them, which is good. So yeah, so that's another thing.
So thank you ever so much, everyone, for listening. You can find my show notes for this episode at crosswires.net. Make sure you check out my YouTube channel at crosswires.net/YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at crosswiresmg. And again, thank you, Stu, so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. I've enjoyed it lots and lots and lots and lots. And please have me back again, because I'm sure we could chat for another hour at least.
Oh, absolutely. I'm working my way through all the RMCers at the moment. I'm just trying to build up the courage to... Eventually I'll get the courage to ask Neil if he has the time. So we shall see.
He may have the time. He's a rather busy chap. He's a rather busy chap. He doesn't stop, you know. When was there Sunday? He's on the go all the time.